Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. That's how we get the word out about what we're doing. I'm excited for our guest today. I'm excited to get into his story because I'm really curious. Travis and I just met, through online, and he's got a book called From Coma to Coma. He's been an entrepreneur since he was 11 years old, 32 now, had multiple near-death experiences, which I'm excited to talk about, um, and how that's made him who he is right now. He does creative consulting. He's been doing that for over a decade, and then he just started media productions just a few months ago. So really cool stuff. It sounds like Travis is doing, but welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's go back first of all. You started being an entrepreneur, you said at 11. So were your parents entrepreneurs, or like where did that come from at such a young age?
So funny enough, no, my parents aren't really entrepreneurs, although my
Awesome.
mom just finished law school and is getting ready to start her own law office. So that kind of counts towards that now.
Wow.
Um,
How old's your mom now?
my mom is, oh, I gotta think about this. She is 52.
Wow, she's starting her own law office now. That's
Yep.
so cool. Okay.
But yeah, so when I was around 11 years old, my grandfather and I believe his brother, I don't remember specifically who, but I know my grandfather for sure, they got me my first computer, a desktop computer. And I was always interested in electronics, understanding technology. It was in that I grew up in that phase where we transitioned from one level of technology to another. I remember VHS tapes when we had Walkman CD players, before we had iPods and iPads and iPhones and all of that. And what ended up kind of leading to this entrepreneur side of things is my mom discovered that there was this website design course for beginners. And because of my interest in everything, she, expressed if I was interested. And I was like, yeah, let's give it a try. So I actually took a very simple basic online website programming class. And by simple, I mean, you couldn't really necessarily design a structured website just off of what you learned in that class, but you understood the fundamentals that you could kind of take it a little bit further. Well, one of the ways that I have always learned in my life is give me the fundamentals and then I will take off and figure out the rest of it by myself. And that's what I did with this. I use, search engines to figure out like, okay, I want to be able to do this though with the website. How do I do this? And took in all that information to be able to start learning how do I actually build a functional website. And so that's kind of what led to that. And I once I figured out how to do it, I would join community forums and be like, oh, this person's looking for this, they can do this. Well, here, I can do that for you for, $50. I didn't understand business or finances at that point at 11 years old. That wasn't something I
Anything is great. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I started doing that. Along the way, I also learned how to do a little bit of graphic design work because in order to build a website, you needed the graphics that could fulfill those functions visually. And so I did that for a while. The only reason why I didn't keep doing that is one, I didn't understand the business aspect, but two, I became so obsessed with it. It was getting in the way of basic day-to-day life. I was ignoring getting chores done. I was ignoring doing school, like all of those things. And so, unfortunately, my parents had to make the decision of kind of cutting me off from the area, which I do not judge them for that at all.
No,
Um, maybe I did a little bit when I was at that point in my life,
you're
but
like
now,
making
like,
money. That's great.
right, exactly. And so that's where I started. Now, those skills that I learned back then have led to opportunities still today. I still help people with developing their websites, with maintaining the functionality of their websites today. I build and design all of my own websites. So, like my personal site, I put together. My website for my upcoming business, I'll put together. I will admit my level of education and what websites have become today is not as caught up to date as it was back then. And I will eventually hit that point where I'll be like, okay, cool. Give it to somebody else to work on building what we need to build because I just don't have the time and energy to learn more of that now when I'm focused on doing the consulting work, focused on building the media company. But that's kind of where I got started. I would say that is truly what ignited that passion in my mind of I want to build a business empire. I want to create a legacy for my family's name that is based off of, building this empire.
That's cool. And then, then fast forward, a major part of your life has been health challenges.
Mhm.
Dive into that, like what they kind of were, if you don't mind, and like how they have impacted you.
Yeah, for sure. So the health challenges actually started even before the website building aspects came in. So at 3 years old, I had developed severe meningitis. That's when you're a kid, and when you're an adult for that matter, can be very dangerous if not treated early enough. And, I went through some isolated treatment for that. I was locked basically in a hospital room by myself. I couldn't be around other children. The only people allowed in the room were the doctors, nurses, and my parents, which is not fun when you're 3 years old. And I'm the most social person in the family. I'm probably the most extroverted one out of everybody. So when you're that way, that makes it even more difficult. So that started around 3 years old. Fast forward to a little bit after graduating high school, I was starting to have some health concerns, but nobody knew what was going on because I couldn't really explain how I felt, how it seemed to me. A couple years after high school, we discovered that I was having blackout seizures where I wasn't having the seizure where you drop to the floor or anything like that. It was all of a sudden, it looked like I was off in my own universe. But it took a while for anyone to be around when that happened to discover that it was even happening. It was actually my mom who realized what was going on when my dad was showing us his new car, and all of a sudden I was out, I was gone. Um, I was finally diagnosed with having a arteriovenous malformation in the brain. Um, that was a stressor on its own because not only was I diagnosed with that, but it actually affected my career choice at the time. I was trying to follow in some of my family members' paths and going into law enforcement at the time. When you have brain damage, good luck with that.
Right.
So we discovered that, and what that is basically um, part of my brain. So like two of the veins, they're not wired correctly. It's like trying to put the wrong ends of batteries together and expecting it to work. It's just not going to function right. This led to a small bleed in the brain, which is what was triggering the seizures. It took quite a while to be able to find where that was or even what it was that was going on. I actually had to have a surgery done where they ran a line from my thigh up into my brain so that they could put a special type of like ink. It's not the right word for it, but basically ink that could go into the brain where they could do special scans to try to find anything. During the surgery itself, they couldn't see anything. They couldn't find anything. It was after the surgeon was reviewing everything later on while I was in recovery that he suddenly spotted this little spot in the brain and figured out what was going on. I ended up having a laser radiation surgery several months later to close it up because there was where it was located, there was no way to do an actual physical surgery on it. After that, you know, I felt great. I was feeling good. I felt fine until about 3 months after the laser radiation surgery. My brain had swelled so much that it was basically trying to explode out of my skull.
Oh, geez.
I I ended up in the ER. I ended up having we weren't sure that I was going to make it. Thankfully, they were able to do a steroid injection that brought the swelling down, saved last minute from having to have an emergency surgery done. Um, the downside to that is my brain didn't want to stay down once the swelling was gone. It keeps swelling back up and swelling back up. I ended up having to go on the max dose of the steroid medication for almost a year in order to keep the swelling down while it, continue to try to heal inside so that eventually I could come off the medication and my brain would be at a normal state. In the process of all of this, um, I got really sick. At one point, I weighed over 400 pounds because of just the effects of the steroid medication, what it was doing to my body. I would sleep somewhere to 15 to 18 hours a day, be up for a couple hours, only to be exhausted and go right back to bed. It was not the most favorite time dealing with that, but it was keeping me alive, and I kind of just had to deal with it at the time. Um, then moving forward, 4 years ago, 4 years ago in April, I was working at a radio station. I'd only been there about a month, and I was dealing with a really bad upset stomach. I'd been dealing with it for a few days, no idea why I was dealing with it. One morning, it hurt so bad. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was done. I'd had enough. Called 911. The fire department with the ambulances was literally like a 2 minute walk away from my apartment. Knew some of the guys just from being around in the neighborhood. They came, picked me up, took me to the hospital where I was diagnosed with having pancreatitis. Okay, not an immediate concern. I mean, obviously a concern, but not something that was emergency related until all of a sudden it was. But pancreatitis was so bad in my stomach that my body began to shut down organs. My kidneys began to shut down. Everything began to shut down to where I
At this
blacked out.
point, you're like 400 pounds.
Nope, I had lost significant weight at that point. I was just under, I was about what I am now, so around 280, 290 at that point.
Okay.
Um, but so they, everything started to shut down. I didn't know what was going on because I blacked out and kind of lost consciousness at that point where I was awake, but I don't remember anything from this period. Um, so they ended up having to put me in a medically induced coma because my body, it needed as many resources as it could get to heal. At one point, I was connected up to 11 different IV lines at the same time. I had to have dialysis done, all of these things just to keep me alive. And so I was in the hospital for 3 weeks when this happened. 2 of those weeks, I was in the coma. While I was in the coma, I lived a perpetual nightmare state in my mind. It was like having a dream, except the dream wasn't a dream to my brain. It was a memory. So everything that happened in that dream, I thought was reality. I thought it was things that actually were happening. Um, and it was rough. It was rough. People that I loved and cared for were dying in this nightmare. My younger brother, when I came out of the coma, I thought my brother was dead. All of these little things. So it was a nightmare state. And it took a while to recover. When I finally got to go home, I was using a walker the first few days to be able to kind of move while being supervised and everything. I went back to my parents' place. I didn't go back to my apartment. Then I transitioned from a walker to walking around with a cane. And then eventually, as the muscle rebuilt, because I lost 75 pounds of muscle while in the coma. As everything started to, strengthen back up and rebuild, I had to start physical therapy. Physical therapy was interesting because while we were doing this to help rebuild my muscle, one of the physical therapists realized that there was something off about my left shoulder. My shoulder at this point was, no matter how I moved it, it sounded like a Rice Krispie treat, stack, crackle, and pop. And so I ended up having to go and get more scans and x-rays and everything done, where we discovered I had avascular necrosis in my shoulder. It has been pretty much decided that the reason why I have developed avascular necrosis is because of the steroid medication I was on to keep the swelling down in my brain, because that can be a common side effect of it. So, about 6 months after being in the coma and dealing with all of that, I had to have a partial left shoulder replacement surgery done. I am now getting ready to have the same surgery done on my right shoulder this year, and then both of my hips over the next 2 years, because this developed pretty much in all of my joints altogether. Uh, but that's not where it ends. So 2 years ago, I I was pushing myself hard. I was at a new job. I'd been there for about a year at this point. I was working hard, and then when I was done working, putting in sometimes 10 to 12 hours a day at the job, I'd go and I'd work out for another, hour, hour and a half every day. Eventually, it pushed my body overboard while at work, producing a training show for the rest of the staff. I collapsed into having a full on seizure. If I had been by myself, chances are good I wouldn't have survived because I ended up with liquid in my lungs and would have ended up suffocating. I thankfully was with the person that was recording the training with me. He realized something was going wrong.
Video.
Yeah. Yeah, I say he realized something was going wrong back in the control room. He immediately stopped what he was doing. This was a live recording as well. So we had over 200 some people watching as this happened. He realized what was going on, called for help. The guy that I was working with, he was a chiropractic doctor. He called help from one of our nurse practitioners, to help with everything, get an ambulance there. They were able to get me to the hospital. I spent about 3 days in the hospital after this because of just the liquid building up in the lungs, all of that. I now struggle with asthma again. I had asthma when I was younger. I deal with that all over again now. And it was stressful. It was frustrating because I thought I was past all of that. I thought I was moving on from having to deal with those health issues where now, I walk around with a cane when I go out in public right now because of the stress on my hips. The avascular necrosis is not very supportive of that. So sometimes, if my hip just pops out, that cane helps me not just collapse to the ground. I deal with asthma. I also am a type 2 diabetic, so I have to figure in all of, dealing with the blood sugar levels. My body is very stressed out, and so I have to be careful about what actions I perform, what I get myself involved in, all of that. And when I hit that point in my life, I'm like, there was times where I'm like, why put forth the effort to try to do anything anymore? Why am I not just giving up and living in a depressive state and just sitting and eating chocolate and watching TV all day? And at that point, that's when I knew I needed to get my head on straight. And part of that was in writing this book. This book took me, I want to say it was 5 years to write because I started writing this book before the coma incident. I realized that the reason why I never finished it was because there was more to tell. There was more to figure out.
There's
And
still lots more to tell too, by the way.
oh, for
Like
sure.
version two.
The funny thing is it's already being planned. A second edition is being planned. We'll kind of see where that goes. I already have a lot that I want to add to it. I know I'm also hopefully going to have my mom contributing to the second edition because she's been here alongside me this entire journey. So to get a perspective from her for everything that was going on the outside would be amazing. And it's something her and I discussed for the first edition, but time to be able to do that just wasn't available, for both of us at the time. And so it's going to be interesting to have her perspective included in the second edition of the book.
That's really cool. So what have you learned about health in all of these things that have, transpired?
So from everything I've dealt with here, obviously our physical health is incredibly important. If we're not maintaining our physical health, we can have situations like what I've faced or what even other people have faced themselves, whether it's even more major situation or less of a situation. We're going to have these things. So maintaining our physical health is super important. I mentioned, the emotional health side. After I was done in the coma, I actually went back to school and got my master's in psychology because one, I wanted to understand more of how your emotional state and your mental state was affected by the physical health side of things, how our mental and emotional state affected our physical health side of things. When you're in a depressive state, when you're in an anxious state, it actually can cause your body to shift and run things differently, where it's not doing as much work as it should be to maintain your physical health. It can cause you to feel more aches and pains. It can cause you to feel more exhausted, all of that. And I wanted to understand that. So I went back to school for psychology. I got my master's in psychology. And then I was like, there's more to this. It truly, it doesn't matter what anyone believes as far as the spiritual aspect goes, because no matter what your foundation of belief is, it's going to affect you either way. Personally, my faith is in God. I'm a born again believer. I believe all of those aspects without going into it. For me, it was I needed to reconnect with God because I had distanced myself so much after the coma. I was angry after all of these different health issues. Why me? Why? What is all this? What is the purpose of this? And it's over the last couple of years that I've kind of dug back into scripture. I've dug back into my relationship with God, and I'm
Right.
seeing sometimes the things that we face and experiences is in preparation for something better.
That's right.
And so for me, I'm like, okay, spiritual health is just as important as your emotional, mental, and physical health. And these three key foundations of our life also affect how we're able to handle our personal lives. So, like our family, our children, our spouses, friendships. Because If we have an aspect of our foundational health, like if we don't have the energy because of something being off in our physical health, we're sure not going to have the physical energy to deal with the craziness of our kids or dealing with, our friendships going, hey, we should go out more or we should do this, or we're not going to have the energy for that. And it also affects our professional life. If we don't have the physical ability to do something, if we're in a constant brain fog because we are physically drained or we are emotionally drained, we're not going to be able to think or focus or do the hard work that it takes to grow in our professional lives either. And so that's one of the things that I focus on in my book is we have to figure out what is that formula for our lives because it's going to be different for everyone as far as what areas they need to focus on. But we have to figure out what is that formula for us to find that balance for us because balance is not 50-50. You're not going to have 50% of your life is just personal or 50% of your life is just professional. What are the aspects that build that 50-50 life? And is it actually supposed to be 50-50? I'm single. I don't have any kids. I don't have a wife. I don't have any of that. So right now I can focus significantly more on my professional life along with my personal life. I don't need to focus more on personal, having the responsibility of kids, raising kids. I don't need to focus on that. So that's why I'm focused on building my career. But I have to remember I still need to maintain and continue to develop my physical, my mental, and my spiritual health as well.
What are some things that I know with, and a lot of our listeners obviously know my story with healing through MS, cutting out sugar, dairy, all the things. What are some things that you've done personally to help to heal your physical health? And then emotional, and then, all the different aspects. What are some specific things, action steps that people could take that you've taken, that people could copy that you feel have helped?
So I think the biggest thing that I have discovered helps in all three of these areas is understanding how they function and how they work. For me, I said I went back to school for psychology. I also dug really deep into self-educating myself on neurology because for me there was so much going on in my head. I lived in a perpetual state of brain fog for years and I didn't know why. I couldn't figure out why can't I think clearly? Why can't I focus? Or I would have only short moments where I could do that. And so I wanted to understand, okay, how is the brain working? What could cause this? For me, I discovered that not handling being a diabetic very well played a huge part in why I was dealing with so much brain fog. Because even if I cut back on sugar, I wasn't realizing that consuming carbs, especially a lot of the unhealthy carbs that we have in our world, all that was doing was becoming sugar in my physical body, which was causing a lot of the brain's fog in the mental state. So for me, the biggest thing I have done is I have become stricter, not perfect, but stricter on what I consume in my body. I used to drink soda on a regular basis or just carbonated beverages in general, even if it was like sparkling water, all of that. I discovered that just carbonated beverages in general really affects my health in a negative way. I become very bloated. It puts a lot of stress on my joints. And so it was causing a lot of negativity. It was causing me to feel exhausted and not be able to think and focus very. So now I don't drink them anywhere near as often as I do. I still have the occasional soda or the occasional, sparkling water or stuff like that, but it's not a day-to-day beverage anymore. But in doing that, cutting out all of that, I cut out the sugar level of what's in soda, which is a great thing, but I lost the caffeine benefits of all of those carbonated drinks. So then I had to be like, okay, what's the next thing that I can do to help with the caffeine level? Because while I strongly believe there comes a point in our life where we don't need caffeine to function if we're taking care of ourselves well, maintaining ourselves well. I'm not at that point, nowhere near at that point. So this morning, I made my cup of coffee. I had to figure out what coffee works best for me. And I drink straight up black coffee. I don't add any creamer or anything like that. But then I realized as I started drinking coffee for the caffeine benefits, I was killing on the electrolyte side of things. I was losing being hydrated because caffeine, or not caffeine, but coffee itself will mess with your electrolytes. It'll burn through it. So then I had to figure out, okay, what's the healthy option that isn't going to bring back all the sugar like what's in Gatorade or Powerade? That's going to be that healthy balance. So I moved on to using a electrolyte powder that is all natural, but does a really good job in helping me keep that electrolyte balance. So in a lot of ways, what I'm saying is You have to figure out what works best for you, because even though we try to live in the idea that one thing will solve all problems, it really won't, because everybody is a different place in their life and everybody's bodies reacts differently to everything. What works well for me isn't necessarily going to work well for others. And the hard part about all of this is you have to go on the search for the information to figure out what works best for you. But if you truly want to take care of yourself, you have to be willing to put forth the effort to research, read a million books if you have to about it, go on and read research studies, learn how, your brain works, understand the neurology aspect of it. Whatever it is, you have to be willing to dive into that.
That's good. I love it. Very cool. And what about, the emotional side? What's something that like meditation? What's something that you've implemented that you've found to be, really helpful on that level?
Yeah, so for me, the on the mental side of things, I discovered that isolation in a natural environment is what works best for me. So until recently, dealing with all the hip issues, I used to love being able to just go for walks. Go for walks, whether it's in the neighborhood or going on a hiking trip, stuff like that. Being in just a natural environment, because when it's all natural, that's when you're truly finding the most amount of peace, because it's meant to be, it's meant to flow. It's what was created for us to live in. And so for me, finding that peace in the natural aspect was the biggest impact. Being limited on doing that now, I tend to spend a lot of time in two areas. The first one, meditation, because being able to just sit, take a deep breath, have your eyes closed and process, okay, what do I need to focus on today? Or what is something I need to make a decision on that I'm running out of time to make that decision on, or I know is going to come up at some point that I need to be ready to address. Meditation, I have also discovered, is not necessarily for everybody, or they're not necessarily ready for that to be the first thing that they try to do, which I totally get. When I first started doing meditation or trying to do meditation, I was so stressed, so tense, so unable to relax. It just was not effective for me at all. It took several years for me to get to a point where I could use meditation. The way that I got to that point was using music. The psychology behind music is just fascinating, because it's not just music itself, it's sound, it's tone, it's the flow of the music. I'm actually getting ready to teach at a youth internship about the sound behind, or the science behind sound and how music works. Um, but I would use music. If I was stressed out and I needed to relax, I might turn on some really slow worship music where I was focusing on both my need to relax, but also on my spiritual aspect as well. If I needed motivation, if I had stuff to get done, I would turn on that upbeat, heavy rock, like let's just punch it and get it done style music, because literally those different tones and paces, they they invest in how your brain functions, how it operates. It will help raise or lower things like your dopamine level to get you to a emotional state and where you need to be. So meditation and music are two of my big ones. The other thing is, if you're someone who loves to read books, choose what kind of books are going to be best for what state you want to be in. If I want to relax and just take it, take a day to just like not do anything, I tend to read more novel style books, because they're fictional. They're made for you to be able to relax. If I need motivation because I have stuff that I need to get done, I will grab books by authors like Patrick Bet David or David Goggins or Jocko Willink, who they've already been through that journey of getting to that point to push forward and be successful and motivated. So their books do exactly that when they are sharing their own story within the book.
Awesome. I love it. Very cool. And switching gears a little bit, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Yeah, so for my personal brand, for myself, I do a lot of creative consulting. I have been working in and out of media for most of my life. Like I said, starting with website design at 11, I moved into working in, doing video projects and film work. Probably when I was about 16, 17 years old. Some of that involved just experimenting with a camera and computers and all that on my own. Some of that involved getting involved with my church, getting involved with the church, helping them with their video production, learning from the people who already did all of that, learning how to do sound engineering. My first focus when I decided to go to school was actually in audio engineering. I loved audio engineering. I still do. That's why I still am so involved in music, playing at shows, recording music, all of that. Um, I took a break from all of it when I was in that depressive state, but a friend who I'm now helping her to produce her first single kind of brought me back into it and realizing that's what I love. I love the creative aspect. And that's part of why I've dived into creative consulting is I love creativity and others love creativity, but sometimes the frustration that comes with being creative is not having that experience or that knowledge to be able to push forward and do what you really want to do. And having someone that can walk alongside you and helping with that can sometimes be the best way to learn. I talked about earlier about how I would love to just go search the internet to learn everything. Sometimes that's not easy for other people, but sometimes having that visual experience, that walking guide with everything is huge. So that's what I love to do. I love to do creative consulting alongside my own creativeness. And that's why I'm starting my media production company that's focused on creating my own original products. I have a journal and I just created a Trello board for project management that literally has areas of just concepts for ideas that I have written in or put in there for years. I probably have a good 10 to 15 years of just ideas, whether it be song ideas, whether it be video game ideas, whether it be film or television ideas, whatever it is that I write just a general title and then a description of what I expect it to look like. And then I put it to the side because I may not be able to produce it right now, but it's going to come up in the future where I can. And so that's where I started my media company. Right now, I have the time to invest into that. And so I'm starting with playing to my strengths. My strength right now is in writing. I said I released this book, already planning a second edition. I'm actually writing another book already that will kind of go alongside this book, but I'm also writing a novel now as well. And so because those are strengths I can play to because of some of the physical limitations that I'm dealing with, the music's the same thing. While I will not be playing drums again anytime soon because of my hips, that's part of, I think, what led to my hips getting a little worse over the last few months as I played drums for a song performance. I can still write music. I can still run the computer that helps recording it. And so that's where my focus is like I said earlier, I want to build that legacy, not just for myself, but for my family. I want to, when it comes time to have a wife, have kids, all of that, I want to already have a foundation that is growing to support my family so that they can pursue what they want to pursue, that they can move forward and be like, hey, this is something new, something different. No one in our family's ever done it. Okay, cool. Let me help you have that support in order to be able to do it. Because having been in that position where I just work jobs for the money, not because I enjoy the work, I want to be able to give my family that opportunity and even start something like an organization that can help others pursue what they love, what they want to do even more. So I'm like, I'm young. I got the time to invest into it. That's what I'm doing right now.
Awesome. I love it. So in wrapping up, I always have three final questions and then anything we didn't touch on that we want to make sure we leave our listeners with. First and final question is if someone is looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
I would say ignore the distractions around you because it's the distractions around you that will keep you from believing that you can achieve that which you want to achieve.
Second question, what's one favorite quote and why?
Ooh, I'm gonna have to pull it up because I don't remember it off the top of my head. So give me 1 second here.
Sure thing.
But I just shared it on Threads the other day.
hmm And by the way, guys, his book and all the information will be in the show notes. So definitely check things out. And if Travis can help you with his company, that'll also be there. Reach out on that level too, or just I'm sure have a conversation. Travis seems like a pretty friendly guy, so feel free to reach out.
Oh yeah, and if you do reach out to me, whether it's on social media or through the contact form on my website, it may take a hot minute, but I do my best to respond to everybody.
Perfect.
So as far as the quote goes, I don't remember where the quote comes from, but the quote is, "The peace I feel without your presence in my life is worth being the villain in your story." And this isn't just directed to people. This is also directed to distractions. It's just directed towards situations that you face. I would much rather be the villain in the story of my health not liking me, but still succeeding than to have just given up and quit. Now that I am at that state mentally, I can say, guys, the only reason that you should ever give up is because you've died. Otherwise, always keep pushing. And I realize that's more than one sentence, but sorry.
That's all good. I love that. Always keep pushing. Third question is, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
Survivor.
Cool.
Survivor, because it'll encourage people to know that I went through a battle worth fighting and I survived it.
So you run into someone in a coffee shop, they listen to this, they heard your story, um, all the things we just went through. What's something we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
So I think one thing that we didn't touch on is it's not just health issues that I have dealt with. I have had to deal with some relational issues. Um, a lot of that has actually been not just recently, although hard recently, but also just in life in general. And out of respect for those that it has affected, I'm not going to share too much information, but I want to tell you, you are going to run into situations. It may be with family, it may be with friends, it may be with coworkers, or just random strangers on the streets that are not going to believe in you. They're not going to support you, and they're going to judge you, and they're going to attack you for it. You can't let that hold you back. One of the biggest mistakes that I made, I know I'm only 32, but one of the biggest mistakes I made in my 20s is the idea that, well, that's a good idea and all, but you need to have a backup plan. Forget the backup plan, because if you're sitting and lingering on a backup plan, you are not going to put forth the effort to really accomplish that which you desire to accomplish the most, because you're always going to have that, well, what if I fail? What if I can't do this? If you have that mentality, you're not going to do it. So you need to, if you're going to do something, you need to 100% focus on that. You need to 100% be there and cut out the distractions of others. Um, and just really drive into it. That's the only way you're going to succeed. David Goggins talks about this, that everything that he wanted to achieve, everything he wanted to do with his life, yeah, he went through and paid the price a lot on relationships, but he also paid the price a lot physically. This guy is crazy in how he does stuff like runs marathons with a broken leg. All of these things. He's a firefighter up in Canada for those huge forest fires that they deal with every year. His body doesn't like him for it, but he pursues it because his mental state is so strong. He can get his body that extra little bit of fuel that it needs to push through it.
Agreed. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Guys, definitely reach out. Like I said, if you have any questions, check out Travis's book, From Coma to Comma. And we'll have those links, like I said, in the show notes. Let's go out there. If we can change one life or one starfish at a time, together, we can help change the world. Thanks for being on, Travis.
Yeah, thank you for having me.